How close are we to a future where human cells become the medicine? And what role could artificial intelligence play in bringing that vision to life? Well, in today's episode, we're going to explore one of the most promising frontiers in medical science, AI-powered cell therapy. And at the centre of that story is my guest today, Rafael. He's the CEO and founder of CellVoyant, which is a biotech spinout from the University of Bristol, and one that's rethinking how we develop life-saving treatments. His background as a physicist, mathematician and biologist positions him uniquely to bridge the worlds of science and entrepreneurship. And CellVoyant's mission is deceptively simple: make cell therapy faster and more affordable and more accessible. But as you'll hear today, the complexity of working with living cells and the limitations of current methods have created enormous challenges across biotech and pharmaceutical sectors. But by using advanced AI and imaging, Rafael and his team are helping to predict how cells will behave, reducing the cost and the time involved in developing therapies in everything from cancer and diabetes to Parkinson's disease. And ultimately, today's conversation is one of hope. But it's also grounded in data, science, technology, and offering a practical path forward. So, do you believe AI can democratize access to cell therapy? And what do you think it will take for biotech innovation to scale sustainably across borders? Well, before answering, let's sit down and listen to today's guest. So, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes, thank you, first of all, very much, Neil, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here in the podcast and tell you a little bit about what our company does and my interests. So my name is Rafael Carazo Salas. I am founder and CEO of a company called CellVoyant Technologies, which is an AI-first biotechnology company with a mission to accelerate the development of cell therapies using the power of AI. I am a mathematician and physicist by training turned biologist. So I've done decades of interdisciplinary research. I'm also an academic as well as a repeat founder, and I'm currently a professor and chair of biomedical sciences at the University of Bristol. Bristol is where I am today.
Fantastic. And this is an audio podcast, so people can't see this, but your backdrop at the moment is human cells. So I know you're passionate about your work, but let's begin by telling me more about CellVoyant and how your team is actually using AI imaging to accelerate and democratize access to cell therapy, because we hear a lot around the hype around AI, but this is a very real thing that you're doing here and making a real difference through technology. So tell me more about it.
So CellVoyant is a spin-out of the University of Bristol, founded in 2021. It's a biotech company that works at the intersection of two cutting-edge technologies where, in fact, the UK has been leader, AI, of course, and stem cells. And so we integrate the two to accelerate the industry, to accelerate the development of novel medicines. So cell therapies is just the way we call drugs that are made of cells instead of being made of chemicals. We're used to taking an aspirin for headache, and that's a chemical, a small chemical. We're used to taking proteins or fragments of proteins, antibody fragments as drugs. But ultimately, all diseases and ailments boil down to cells in our tissues and organs responding in an abnormal way or dysfunctioning in some way. And so you can imagine that cells themselves could be the pill, so to speak. And so cell therapy's focus is on basically generating therapies using cells as drugs. Now, why AI comes into the picture is because this is a relatively new type of medicine compared to classical drugs. They're much more expensive to make, in many ways, much more difficult to make. And so AI provides tools to accelerate, improve this industry that otherwise is bound to be much lengthier and potentially much more expensive than conventional drugs, to instead unlock the value that cells could have as drugs. Take a type 1 diabetes patient. This is a disease that is incurable currently. Individuals need to inject themselves insulin every day. Otherwise, they die. And even if they do inject themselves insulin, they will suffer from lots of side effects and complications. This is because they've lost one particular type of cell in their body from their pancreas. So what if instead of giving insulin, which will never make those cells reappear, we gave those cells as a drug, and those cells could then now produce insulin in the patient? In fact, they're now in clinical trials from companies like Vertex Pharmaceuticals in Boston. There are now cell therapies that are, moving forward, in an accelerated way towards approval, hopefully soon, that do exactly that. So pancreatic cells that are used as drugs that have cured the incurable. So this is the opportunity we're trying to seize at CellVoyant, and we're leveraging AI to be able to make the industry faster, better, and more accessible to everybody.
Wow, that is a fantastic example that you shared there, one that will resonate with people listening all around the world. And I think it really highlights what groundbreaking technology this is. And to further bring it to life, any other examples you can share around how AI is reshaping the biotech and pharma landscape, and also any specific breakthroughs that you're seeing in areas like cell manufacturing, therapeutic discovery, because it feels like a really exciting space at the moment, and one that's moving incredibly quickly.
Absolutely. Yes. So cell therapy, officially, let's say the modern version of cell therapy, using cells to treat individuals has been around for a while. We just didn't call it cell therapy. A blood transfusion is a cell therapy. It's just a very complex one. You're taking a mixture of cells and other substances that, that compose blood, and putting it in somebody else, maybe after purifying it partly and so on. But that is a cell therapy, albeit a very complex one. Modern cell therapy started, admittedly, with a type of therapy called CAR T cells, which some listeners may be familiar with. This is now being used to treat more than 30,000 individuals globally. It's more than 10 years old. It's the first modern cell therapy, so to speak, and it is now a billion-dollar industry. These are immune cells that are modified outside of the body and then reintroduced into the body of patients suffering from blood cancers, leukemias, and the like. That target specifically, those immune cells have been genetically modified to then dock onto the cancerous cells and destroy them and lead them to be destroyed in ways that conventional drugs couldn't. I've of course, unfortunately, as many of the listeners, I'm sure, I have individuals in my family who have suffered from tumors. And one of the things that conventional drug therapies have is toxicity, inevitably. The classic anti-cancer drug, Taxol, for example. Well, it needs to be dosed according to the body weight, mass index, because inevitably that drug kills all cells. It just kills cancer cells a bit more, but the toxicity is very high. Many of us have seen people losing hair, for example, when they take these classical chemotherapeutic drugs. With drugs like CAR T cells, these cells that actually bind to the cancer cells, specifically killing those cells, of course, the specificity is much higher, the potency is much higher. And this has totally revolutionized the way many blood cancers have been treated, as I said, for over a decade now. So that's in the space of cancer. As I mentioned before, for example, in diabetes and metabolic diseases, we have been breakthrough therapies like these type 1 diabetes therapies that I mentioned before. Parkinson's disease, there's one that really actually gives me the goosebumps when I think about it. It's an ongoing clinical trial between Novo Nordisk and a university in Sweden called Lund University, as well as involving a couple of universities in the UK, I believe Cambridge and Imperial, if I'm not mistaken. Parkinson's, as we all know, many of us have family members that are suffering from these conditions. Neurodegenerative disease leads to very, very obvious lack of movement coordination. And this is because there's a specific type of nerve cell called dopaminergic neurons, which are lost in these patients. And again, there's no amount of drugs you could throw at an individual that will make those cells grow back. But there is, Novo Nordisk is currently developing this therapy, which is in clinical trials, where they've made this type of cell, a precursor of these cells, that they can implant into the brain of patients. And incredibly, some of the initial cohort members of these patient groups have had their symptoms revert. The individual number one of the cohort of this particular clinical trial, called STEM-PD, after 20 years of Parkinson's tremors, now can play golf. And these are, again, it's treating the untreatable, curing the incurable. It's things that cell therapy can do that no conventional medicine could do, because the cells are so powerful, so sophisticated, unlocking possibilities that were not there, and unlocking hope that unfortunately was no longer there. So, these are many other examples. Cell therapies pen to pretty much anything you can make cells for. Fertility, neurodegenerative diseases, loss of eyesight, cardiovascular diseases, you name it. If you can make a cell for it, you can probably develop a therapy to treat a condition. The issue is that, let's say, contrary to, say, aspirin, where, of course, developing a classical drug is expensive, is complex, requires hard science and hard biotechnology. Every molecule of aspirin is identical to every other molecule of aspirin across the billions. It's a rather simple type of drug once you have defined how to synthesize it, how to make it. With cells, every cell is like a human being. The listeners don't see the picture I have in my background, but you noted on it early in the conversation. And, this is a picture of cells. I love to have pictures of cells because I'm a very visual person. And so it reminds me continually of what we're working towards. Every cell is like a person. They wake up differently every day. They are slightly different from one another. Yes, they are generally the same if they are the same type of cells, but each cell is slightly different. That makes them unpredictable, makes them harder to work with, makes them more expensive to work with. Sometimes a batch of cells will not respond the same way. Cells often take really long to become the types of cells, the specialized types of cells that you want to make. Let's say you want to make a pancreatic cell or a retinal cell for the eye or a cardiac cell for the heart and so on. You can use stem cells as a starting material and then treat those cells chemically in the lab for days or weeks until you get these specialized cells that you could develop as a therapy. Each of those steps and all that time, cells respond very often very differently depending on when you're regenerating a batch. And so there's a lot of length, a lot of cost, a lot of unpredictability that the industry has. And therefore comes an opportunity. Because if we could find a way to predict the unpredictable, to harness this variability in the behavior of cells, to learn how to guide cells and steer them better, more efficiently, more robustly towards the destination where we want to guide them, to make brain cells, to make eye cells, to make heart cells, to make liver, pancreas, then we could generate therapies more robustly, more cheaply, and therefore more accessible to everybody. And this is, in fact, what we're aiming to do using artificial intelligence powered platforms at CellVoyant.
Wow, so much of what you said there resonated with me. I sadly lost my father to Parkinson's disease, and I suspect so many people listening around the world have lost people for a variety of reasons that you mentioned there. But maybe I should rein in my excitement a little bit around the impact that technology can make here. It's not as easy as we might make it sound. There's going to be a lot of key challenges that you're coming across in scaling cell therapy today. So tell me more about some of those challenges and also how your approach at CellVoyant is aiming to overcome some of these challenges to deliver what we're talking about here.
One of the reasons why cell therapies are difficult, lengthy, and expensive to make today is because of this unpredictability. If you cannot tell how a cell is going to react to these treatments to be able to make those specialized cells I was mentioning before, then of course, the room for error and for cost just increases exponentially the longer this goes on. So many of the analytical approaches that we have today to be able to analyze, even just look at cells like the ones we're seeing in the picture in my background, to be able to tell what kind of cells you're looking at, you need to kill cells most of the time with today's technologies. To kill the cells, it's a little bit like looking at the motorway, and in order to know who's driving a car and where they're headed to, you need to kill the driver. Then of course, the driver's gone. So of course, they were headed towards the supermarket, but now they're no longer there. So you need to kill the cells to know where they're going. Otherwise, until now, it's not been possible to tell where the cells are going. At CellVoyant, we've been integrating artificial intelligence into platforms that leverage microscopy images in real-time videos, so to speak, movies of cells, and that, not unlike Google Maps, use this information to obtain a roadmap of the roads that cells can take to go from a starting point to an intended finish point, where you want to bring them towards a pancreatic cell, or towards a cardiac cell, towards a retinal cell, etc. It's a little bit as if you observe the motorway, and just by looking at how the cars flow, you could get a picture of you could trace all the roads. And if you now want to go to the airport based on this map, then actually, if you know the starting point and you know the end point, you can calculate the route. That's what Google Maps does. And if there's a traffic jam, you could correct the route because now you need to exit and take a different route to get to destination. That's essentially what we're doing at CellVoyant. We have developed technology that allows us to see what cells are and to prognosticate what cells will do without killing them. And that means, hours and days ahead of time. And seeing into the future, in fact, our slogan is we see the future in cells. Seeing into the future means we can act on it. And so if we see that the cells are going astray, in response to the treatments we're giving them, they're supposed to become, hard tissue, but they're not doing that as efficiently. By reading out the information in real time, a little bit like Google Maps navigation, we can now update the route and say, well, actually, the cells are going a little bit astray. So now, make a left, which in our case would now change the treatment so that the cells are now put back in course again, towards destination to increase with the ultimate goal to get them there faster, get them there more cheaply, and with the ultimate consequence of leading to medicines that are cheaper. Because one thing I didn't mention at the beginning is that these cell therapies, one thing that they have is that they're very expensive. The CAR T cells that I mentioned for leukemias and so on, these are $500,000 a dose. This is no small figure. And that was at the time thought to be the most expensive known to humans. The most expensive cell therapy, and drug known to humans. Some of the more modern cell therapies are coming up with a price tag of $2 to $3 million a dose. And, we're blessed in the UK to have the NHS for many reasons, of course. One of which is, having a public healthcare system means we are blessed with the fact that they can actually consider approving some of these medicines. And for example, just over a year ago, there was a cell therapy for sickle cell disease, again, an incurable disease that is now curable, that was approved as a UK first. The cell therapy is called Casgevy, and this is part of the NHS. But of course, if they're so expensive, there's only so many of these therapies that can be taken up by the healthcare systems, whether they're public, like in this country, or private, as in the US. And that's where we come in. By using technologies that can prognosticate what cells are going to do in the future, we can use that to read out and improve the processes so that we can ultimately make cheaper drugs so that they can be more accessible for more ailments and for more individuals.
And when I was reading about you before you came on the podcast today, one of the things that stood out to me is you wear many hats. You are both a scientist and an entrepreneur. I love that. So how do you view the UK's ambition to be a global tech leader, as someone that wears both of those hats, especially through initiatives like the AI Action Plan? So tell me more about that plan and how you see this.
Yeah, I think the UK is incredible, right? It is an academic powerhouse. It is a powerhouse of innovation, of invention. And certainly AI is a great example of this. So, we're an AI hub and powerhouse from the academic point of view. I mean, a lot of the original work in what we consider AI, the Turing test, for example, to name, to cite Alan Turing from the UK, of course, computers from the UK, and AI, take DeepMind, for example. I mean, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2014 awarded to researchers from DeepMind, which is a Google an Alphabet family company, but it was born in the UK and it stayed here, and it's really boosted our standing globally in AI to, in this case, unlock a mystery of how proteins fold in 3 dimensions that will unlock unlimited potential in terms of drug development, henceforth. So academic powerhouse, but also industrial powerhouse. I was again using DeepMind as an example. They spun out, based on this protein structure prediction, they spun out now 3.5 years ago, I think it was, a company called the Isomorphic Labs, again, part of the Alphabet group, which in fact, actually, within 2.5 years, signed deals with Eli Lilly, with Novartis, these are tier 1 pharma companies worth a few billions of dollars, and unlocking hundreds of millions of dollars of funding rounds because of the power that AI in the UK, in this case, UK companies, both of them, DeepMind and Isomorphic Labs, unlock potentially for the benefit of biopharma in general. So we are an academic invention and innovation powerhouse. And in particular, in the case of AI, we are a global hub and a powerhouse. And I think those 2 examples I gave really capture that potential and the momentum AI has so much to unlock, really, in this country and all countries in general, but certainly in this country. Clean energy, self-driving cars, empowering and unlocking the NHS, defense, and biotech, cell therapy, like the areas where we are. I think possibilities are unlimited, and the UK is excellently placed to leverage the current opportunities, especially amid the current instability in North America. The US government trade wars, the current tariffs, and so on, which have made destabilize somewhat the US. From this point of view, I think the UK is excellently placed to leverage on our track record, on our potential, and to drive basically the AI revolution going forward. The AI action plan is one move in that direction that is very meaningful. I think everybody recognizes that AI is something we need to invest in and we need to leverage. It is not the future. It happened yesterday already. We just now need to use it to produce benefit to society in all sorts of ways. The action plan, I believe they promise, among others, or they already confirm more than 10, I think it was 14 billion pounds that are committed to follow the action plan. And this is on top of multi-billion investment already from the government that had been promised before. In the case of the government, to obviously enable the 5 key priorities of the government. And these include things like unlocking the NHS and so on and so forth. So I think it's great initiatives. More would be even better. Of course, very eager. Unlocking the development of new science and technology breakthroughs in universities, facilitating the transition and the translation into companies, and then boosting and propelling those companies so that they can deliver are key priorities in my mind that the government is well placed to carry out.
And another thing that I love is that you mentioned there, CellVoyant is a university spin-out. So I'm curious, for people listening all around the world, what would you say the strengths are of the UK's academic startup ecosystem? And where do you see room for improvement? Anything you can share around that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not British by origin, as you can probably tell. So I'm originally from Costa Rica, and I've been traveling a lot. So I'm now a British national since since nearly 20 years, I think now. And I've been here continually since 2002. What attracted and kept me in the UK, but certainly attracted me in the first place is, it is an innovation powerhouse. It is an academic powerhouse, being trained as an interdisciplinary academic. I partly studied here. I partly studied in Cambridge when I was younger before establishing myself here, as I said, a couple of decades back. And as I said, the UK is a prime innovation and invention ecosystem. And as part of that, because its universities are excellent, it also is a cradle to spin out companies like CellVoyant. There are many mechanisms within universities that allow academics who have no experience otherwise to start protecting their intellectual property, technology transfer offices that help spin out companies or license out technologies to companies if the academic's not interested in founding them, potentially putting in touch also with investors. In my case, the University of Bristol was incredibly helpful since the start. What led to the foundation of CellVoyant actually was somehow in my head since 2013. Actually, the company was founded in 2021, and the University of Bristol was key for me to test some of the ideas that then were used as foundational science to lean on to found CellVoyant as a company. So lots of things to like there, lots of talent. We could even continue to attract more talent again in the age of instability. Let's say the UK provides a solid and stable destination where there's excellence across the board academically and excellence across the board industrially. How could we improve maybe the ecosystem? I think one can always improve systems. So even though it works well, I think one area that has been discussed much in the media and where I align is the translation out of academia into founding companies in particular. Traditionally, and this is changing actually, so it is an area where a lot of improvements have been made in the past 5 years, I would say. Traditionally, universities have claimed a big stake of ownership in companies even before they get funded. And this actually, modern investors have gotten a little bit put off by this. But, the system has been changing for the better. Conditions are changing. So giving increasingly better conditions that are conducive, not just for academics to spin out companies, but for investors to be interested in investing in those companies, I think is an area where continued improvement would really, really beneficial.
And I'm curious, from your perspective and everything that you're seeing here, how can the UK maybe better compete with the US, especially in terms of commercializing biotech innovation and retaining top tier talent? What are you seeing here?
Yeah, that's interesting times, Neil. I mean, in particular, I have like a general answer that I would give you, but these days, geopolitics is so interesting that I think it provides actually for an excellent opportunity to address that question with the current geopolitical situation. The UK has been traditionally the university hub of the world, an innovation hub for the world. Of course, compared to the United States, North America, but in particular the US, there are differences. The US, has traditionally been more supportive of moonshots and things like this, literally speaking and figuratively speaking. And they work very differently. The ecosystems, in particular, the commercial, the spin-out ecosystem, for example, been very different in the UK versus the US, and with the consequences in commercialization of biotech innovation and talent retention, so on and so forth. Actually, I think right now there is a very interesting alignment of planets happening because, as obviously with the Trump administration coming in to government in the US, there have been many changes in policies and many changes in economic policies, and including, as I mentioned before, tariffs, the trade wars, as they've been called in the media, and so on, which has led to, of course, market instability, but also, and this is very important, has led to what will be fundamental changes in the fabric of biotech and academia in the US that we could leverage very well in the UK, specifically. Amongst the many early moves of the Trump administration were layoffs in agencies like the National Institutes of Health, NIH, the Food and Drug Administration Agency, FDA, the CDC, which is for disease control and so on and so forth. The NIH, which I mentioned first, is in fact the largest, probably the largest science funder on the planet. And it funds not just research internally inside the institutes themselves, located in Bethesda near Washington, but nationally across the US. Pretty much all universities have academics that receive grants from the NIH to do bio research. And that's actually been part of the fabric of those universities that they can use to plan for decades. As a consequence of layoffs and as a consequence of stopping many streams of funding from the NIH, there's a unique opportunity where many academics have been laid off, actually, unfortunately, all at the same time, excellent academics from top institutions, the NIH, but most institutions across the US. And unless something changes dramatically, the changes that have been implemented will have generational consequences for how the US research, in particular in the bio sector, will take place. This means these researchers and these ideas and invention and potential will need to go somewhere else. And the UK would provide the natural home for many of these individuals to come. I mean, not only the linguistic and cultural continuity, of course, the special relationship that's been longstanding, but actually the momentum that we have in areas that are at the forefront of bio sciences, of biotech, of AI, and so forth. And so I think the UK right now, with its relative stability, the doubling down on the investment in the way it's doing in key areas like AI, could leverage actually and compete in a unique way that it has not been able to until now in commercializing biotech innovation versus the US and attracting and retaining talent.
And of course, what we're talking about here is AI transforming and in many cases saving lives, which is incredibly exciting. But looking ahead, what is it that excites you most about the future of AI-powered biotech, and what impact do you hope that CellVoyant will have in the years ahead?
Yeah, this is I will make it briefly a personal story and then zoom out a little bit. I unfortunately my father-in-law passed away recently, and he passed away of leukemia. And leukemia has been around for a while, and it will still be around for a while. Many of listeners, I'm sure, have personal stories that will resonate to some extent with mine. It just happened actually over the Christmas and New Year's period. And I'm not saying it for the sentimental value that period of the year holds, but because leukemia is a disease of the blood. So you stop having blood cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, depending on the type of leukemia that the individual is suffering from. In the case of my father-in-law, we couldn't get a hold of red blood cells or platelets. Platelets help with blood clotting, with coagulation, with stopping bleeding, basically. And of course, red blood cells are important to carry oxygen everywhere to cells and organs in our body. Without them, we die, of course. That's the problem with leukemia. And because it was the end of the year, nobody goes to donate blood. And so even though you had, of course, if there is a little blood that's donated, it is given priority to, for example, pregnant women who are, delivering babies over the Christmas period and so on and so forth. And I couldn't help but wonder, why is it that we don't have blood cells that can be sold off the shelf? Why can't we have platelets that are sold off the shelf? Right. So what excites me is that I think despite all the tragedies, like in the case of, my father-in-law, he passed away, as I mentioned before, despite all the tragedies, actually, we've never been at a time where we have so many therapeutic breakthroughs that are about to happen. And in particular, aided by AI, that will happen even sooner. This means, giving hope and validating that hope and improving lives and helping people. And as I always joke that, our company's mission actually is about, ultimately helping people and making money. And, what better mission is there to that one, right? But I really do strongly believe, that there is there is hope. There is hope, and this hope we're accelerating towards that hope. And AI, obviously, and AI-powered biotech is really essential to that acceleration. Longevity and treating cancers and treating, like leukemia, treating all sorts of potential ailments, as I said before, both using conventional drugs as well as cell therapies. There's never been a more exciting moment. And so I would say to the listeners, AI is going to bring a lot of good in, and we just need to double down on the investment. We just need to be patient, but there is hope, there is medicines, and there are life-changing moments coming.
There is indeed hope and so many life-changing moments on the horizon. So thank you so much for sharing your amazing story today. But before I let you go, I'm going to see if there's something we can do for you here, because I love to play the role of the connector, and some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or maybe even listened to this podcast. So is that a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, and why? Because he or she might just get to hear this message, but I'd love to see if we can manifest and make something happen here. But who would it be and why?
Thank you so much for this. And again, thanks for the opportunity and the conversation. Yes, I was, I've been blessed to have as a friend, the founder of DeepMind and Isomorphic Labs. That's probably one of the reasons I use them so much, although everybody uses them as an example now. But for many years, I was using them privately as kind of my acquaintance and my friend, whom I admired very much. Demis Hassabis, absolutely outstanding individual. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in the last quarter last year for the work in DeepMind and founding Isomorphic Labs as well, as I mentioned before. So, in the old days, we used to have lunch together, but obviously now we're busy, especially I think he's busier than me. I could easily say that. So I would love to have a lunch with him, simply because it's been a while since we've had the time to actually have a long discussion. And, why not pitch CellVoyant and explain to him why I think we would do wonderful work together if they want to try it out.
Oh, I absolutely love it. What a great answer. And let's throw it out into the universe. Let's see what we can make happen there. Let's get you both to clear those schedules, man, and have that lunch together. But for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about CellVoyant, maybe they would like to help or get involved, where would you like to point everyone listening?
Absolutely. Thank you. So we have our most active page in social media is LinkedIn. Just look for the name CellVoyant. But also for any information, support, anything really, we would be delighted to hear from people. info@cellvoyant.com would be the address to write, and we would be blessed to get feedback. Ultimately, our mission is to do something that is useful to people. So being able to hear back from individuals who see value in it or who want to participate and get involved, we would love that.
Awesome. Well, I'll add links so people can find you nice and easily. And just love chatting with you today about how technology like AI is powering the pharma and biotech industry and making a real impact on people's lives, and is going to continue to do that on a magnitude that we possibly don't understand yet. And also the policies behind it, like the AI action plan, and how here in the UK they're driving to be a tech leader, and how that could impact the biotech industry as well. I think this industry is going to completely evolve over the months and years ahead, and I'd love to stay in touch with you, maybe get you back on later in the year or next year and see how things are continuing to evolve. But just thank you for sharing your story with me today.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the listeners. Thank you very much, Neil.
From mapping the future of cell behavior like Google Maps and plotting your next journey, to reimagining how we produce medicine itself, I think Rafael's work at CellVoyant brings to life what many of us could only imagine, especially when we think about the future of healthcare. And if we zoom out for a moment, today's conversation wasn't just about technology. It was about the tangible impact innovation can have when it is applied thoughtfully, both with scientific rigour and human benefit in mind. But what do you think? Are we truly entering a new era where AI and biology converge in a way that saves lives in ways that we've never seen before? Or are there still systemic barriers that we need to overcome? Let me know your thoughts, experiences and perspectives. And you can share them by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. But that is it for today. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back again very soon with another episode. Hopefully we can talk again. Speak with you then. Bye for now.